Holds a BS degree in chemical engineering from Tulane and has over 30 years of experience working in the refining industry. Helping Lynn today is Todd Monet. He is the plant manager for Lyondell-Basel Houston refinery. He is responsible for the safe, environmentally sound, reliable operation of the Houston refinery. He has experience in engineering, operations, maintenance, turnarounds, reliability, cost reduction, process safety, and work process management and refinery management. He has driven culture change and personnel development while providing senior leadership in those areas. Mr. Monet holds a BS degree in chemical engineering from Mississippi State University, an MBA degree from Rice University, and has 25 years of experience working in the refining industry. Leading off will be Tom McDougall. He's the president of PeopleCore, Inc. He started PeopleCore in 2007 to help refineries change the performance of their personnel on the job, and oversees all of PeopleCore's training, technical, and performance improvement services. Prior to starting PeopleCore, Tom worked for Sunoco and TTS in the areas of PSM, training, culture change, human resources, and labor relations. Mr. McDougall holds a BS degree in mechanical engineering from Marquette and has 20 years of experience in the refining industry. Tom?
Good afternoon. We're in the home stretch, just a few more to go. As I was introduced, I'm Tom McDougall, president of PeopleCore. Not too long ago, we had the privilege of being introduced to the folks at the Lyondell-Basel refinery in Houston. And what we're going to tell you in the next 15 or 20 minutes is, just like our former president said, a little story. A little story about what's happened and what is happening at this refinery. Now, I'm not the best person to tell that story. In fact, the best person to tell that story is the plant manager, and that's why Todd Monet is going to be here in just a second. First, let me introduce Lynn Bourgeois. Some of you might know Lynn from his days in Shell or Texaco. Of course, he's a director now at PeopleCore. And Lynn is the person leading the efforts with Todd at the Houston refinery. Todd Monet, of course, is the plant manager at the Houston refinery. Some of you may know Todd from his days at Shell, but I can guarantee you, you will know Todd going forward at a minimum from his time being the plant manager at Lyondell-Basel. It's a really neat story, and I can't wait to start telling it. Okay. Before we do, there's just a couple of key principles. Actually, I didn't know our president was going to talk about principles in his speech as well. But there's a couple key principles upon which this effort was based. The first one, and that's the objective. The objective is a sustainable change in performance on the job. Too often, when you hear or embark or work in an area like training, development, culture change, the goal ends up being producing wonderful training materials, a great mission statement, nice banner to hang, all that sort of thing. That's great and wonderful. But at the end of the day, what's important is people changing the way they perform on the job. Because when that happens, business results happen. So one of the important things that we had to do is be focused on our objective. The second follows from the first. Documents, training materials, other sorts of things like that are important. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. Again, the objective is change performance on the job. And then lastly, in order to enable this to happen, you not only have to have competence in your workforce, but they have to have confidence, and they have to be comfortable with what they're doing. And in addition to that, as you go through and develop that confidence, you have to have a mechanism to address the issues and barriers that inevitably come up that are put in their way to prevent performance. So those principles are key in order to make a transformation in a refinery, especially the size of the one at Lyondell-Basel in Houston. So without any further ado, let me bring up Lynn and Todd.
Got me on? How's everyone doing? I guess
guess the first thing to say is you will not in this presentation see anything about LP models. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. First of all, for me, it's a pretty good honor actually to get to come up here. I appreciate the invite from Tom and Lynn. And PeopleCore, what we found when we started this project was a company where we got very good alignment around the methodology that we wanted to use to essentially close the gaps that we had in our business, as well as two individuals that I think we found good alignment just in terms of our own personal philosophy. And what I guess my first 6 months, the best way I could describe coming into a new assignment was pretty significant chaos. We had a lot of activities going on, a lot of unreliability happening, and we really had to get our team grounded. And the reason why was, if you go back a while, this did not just start happening overnight. We had significant hurricanes through Houston, Texas. We had a crane incident that several of you, I'm sure, have heard, where we had 4 significant fatalities, significant impacts on the whole site. We had a company that had gone through bankruptcy and was starting to try to come out. None of these had really anything to do with day-to-day excellence of running the plant, and yet very significant impacts at a macro level across the whole organization. And I think one of the things that struck me as I thought about how to position the case for change here, this morning I was actually having coffee with a good friend of mine, Greg Atterbury, a distinguished leader in our industry, and as he thumbed through the slides, he said, you know, Todd, at the end of the day, it's just all about the people. And you think about this very significant conference that we're at, okay? You know, huge assets, big complex technologies, tools. You just heard in the last presentation talking about knowledge transfer and tools, but ultimately, we have a great industry of people. And that's what this story is all about. So, you know, we also, in terms of trying to set the tone, created just a one-pager that we could put in front of the operator and the craft and the supervisors that have to manage that group of the organization every single shift to provide excellence, and really try to describe what were we going after. Okay? And at the start, which all of us do, every one of our companies, you know, we try to get aligned around mission and vision and strategy, and what were we trying to accomplish? What were our goals? And how were we going to do that? All right? That, for the most part, is what I think all of our companies spend a lot of time, getting that top-down structure in place to drive performance every single shift. Where the challenge comes into play is in the lower half, and I'll speak specifically for my company, around how are we going to do it as a team, okay? Because you do have functional silos, you have different levels of competency, you have different competing priorities, and so ultimately you have a game plan, but you have to get out on the field and execute. And so what this was about was, how were we going to take on a task of taking this site from where it was today, which was a so-so performance level, not really competing well in a broad sense in terms of our competitors, and actually becoming the best. Okay? Easy to say. I think all of us that run plants or that participate with big plants have the same aspirations, but ultimately it's how are you going to get there? And so what we ended up setting out to do was really try to set a tone for the plan around we can succeed, we will win, and we're going to do it together. Okay? But now we have to go physically make it happen. And that's not going to be thought of in a boardroom, in a conference, in the office. It's going to be in the field. And so that was ultimately what kind of lined up the cell with PeopleCore, was how are we going to take on this change management process of ultimately turning the organization around from really more of a command and control, top-down, focused organization to one where everything we do, every single shift, is to support that operator and that craft in making the right move at the right time so that we could drive performance. And so we spent a lot of time really trying to get the team's head around that piece. And that was really the essence of the project that we took on. If you can go to the next slide. To be able to do that, though, we had to have a leadership model. Okay, so this was a great opportunity for me, being new to the company, to really kind of get alignment with my team at the site around how we were going to really support the leadership that was required to make us be the best, as well as basically cascade that expectation or this new leadership model through the organization. And so I'm going to just try to walk you through some key concepts here. At the very top, you can see basically we coined the term flipping the triangle. And what that's about is taking your normal, traditional organization and flipping its purpose. In terms of at the very top, what we ought to be doing is setting the operators and the craft and the frontline supervisors up for success in everything we do. And the definition of success was really around understanding what the plan was, setting the tone, setting the direction, being real clear around how you win. Okay? And that I make both of those points because this isn't just a people exercise. Ultimately, we're trying to perform. We want to have the best performance. And so you have to be real clear. I think all of us need to know at the end of the day, what does winning look like? Okay? What are the key metrics? What are the key drivers that we're going to have to understand what winning looks like? And so we spent a lot of time around how are we going to set our frontline supervisors and our frontline and our managers and my team, for that matter, up to be able to define that for the organization. The driver for doing this, quite honestly, is in a lot of cases, the site leadership is the one that sets the tone. But in terms of understanding where the opportunities are, that's not where the knowledge is. Okay, that knowledge is created every single shift in a manufacturing facility in terms of the operator, I fundamentally believe, and the craft, I fundamentally believe, know where the next safety issue is, where the next reliability issue is, where the next product quality issue is, that ultimately impacts that customer. So what we had to do is, how do you tap into that emotion? How do you tap into that knowledge? And then ultimately create fundamentally an ownership and commitment for the business. And I would just contend that, and I'll speak again for my site, but I would expect it's the same challenge for every single one of us. That we have an organization, we have an industry that is not getting tapped fully into that part of our people. And so what this was about is, how do we build an organization and support it with a leadership model that starts to get tapped into the front line and having them really driving the day-to-day performance shift by shift. Okay? So the work starts to change, where you start setting expectations. We now will start to judge our leaders in terms of their capability to coach and mentor, in terms of engaging with the front line. And ultimately, if we do that successfully, you start to get feedback. You start to get issues that are identified. You start to get people on the front line that actually participate in fixing the problem, not just pointing out the problem. And then ultimately, I think that leads to alignment and ownership. So that's really the big point, and we needed some help from PeopleCore to come in and just kind of help in terms of how do we take that leadership model and turn it into something that we can roll with into the field, built on 3 key principles that I'll leave you with: setting direction, delivering results, and then ultimately the gap that we had to work on is, how do we set the organization up to develop its people? So that was really our pace for change.
So the piece that I'm going to focus on is around the coaching model that we apply to that flipping the triangle. As Todd said, he explained to us and worked with us on creating this vision and this strategy for the Lyndale facility. And it quickly became evident what part of the organization that we wanted to attack first. And we applied this coaching model, and I'll bring you very briefly through elements of this model. So transforming the vision and strategy into a coaching plan. First thing we did was we did a very detailed cultural analysis of the whole facility to truly understand what the barriers or the organizational issues or just those things that would prevent us or we'd have to deal with in being successful in coaching. It also helped us outline what targets, what level of the organization we needed to talk it first. And so as you saw in Flip